name is Clint. I'm 63 years young. I was born in 1953 in a small manufacturing town 2 hours north of New York City, Hudson. It's between Poughkeepsie and Albany. My dad was a truck driver and my mom was a housewife, and there were 7 children. In high school, I realized I was different from others and attracted to guys. I realized it, but I was gay, but I kept it to myself, and I didn't know anyone else who was gay or who was like me. I had heard that gay people lived in Greenwich Village, so in New York City. So in 1977, at the age of 24, I took my life savings, $500, a suitcase filled with clothes, and I took Amtrak down to Hudson, from Hudson down to New York City, and stayed at the YMCA. I stayed at Sloan House, which was located at 34th Street and 9th Avenue. $40 a day, $40 a week with my Dutchess Community College ID. So that's important because nowadays it's over $100 to stay there. I didn't know anybody in New York. I called the operator. Now, we didn't have cell phones in those days. This was the 70s. And I asked for information, and the operator got on, and I said, "Where do gay people hang out?" So this poor woman, it was 15 minutes. I kept putting quarters into the pay booth because she kept saying, "Any minute now." But she got some information. There was a magazine called Michael's Thing. It was this tiny little paper that the gay bars would have, and it gave you information about gay bars, gay life, and stuff. So I took the 20-page paper and went to the Y and looked through it, and I decided to go cross town. 34th and 9th is where I was at, and I went to Uncle Charlie's South, which was at 38th and 3rd Avenue. And it was very exciting to see so many gay men. There may have been a couple women, but I was just concentrating on guys. Just so many guys there. I was really excited. I also read, back, if you think about the times, there were no gay community centers. It was basically the bars is where gays hung out. But I did get some information about a gay Catholic group called Dignity. And it was a group that gays and lesbians could actually go and worship. They had a place that was called Woodstock Seminary up on the Upper West Side. And it just made me feel good that I could be gay and also Catholic and go to this service. I'm still a member to this day. Actually, I'm leaving to go there for dinner after this. After living in New York for a year, I wanted my family to know that I was enjoying life and I had friends. I decided to invite, I can't believe I did this, 20 gay guys up to Hudson. My aunt and uncle had a trailer outside of town that they weren't using, so we all stayed there, but we went to my parents' home. My mother, 6 brothers and sisters. My father was out of town, thank God. And I introduced them to these really outrageous characters. I mean, Scott was 17 in high school wearing his sister's pantsuit. Stephen was working in a gay bar and telling all my sisters and brothers, they said, "What do you do for a living?" "I work in a gay bar." And I'm like, geez, I don't think we should really be talking this much. So anyway, so my, after that, we all went back to New York City, and a few days later, I got a call from my mother, who's a very religious Catholic woman, and she said, I was concerned. There seemed to be a lot of homosexuals hanging out. I mean, you're not one of them, are you? And I said, yes. Well, unfortunately, my mother was very upset, told me I was going to be condemned to hell, talked about Sodom and Gomorrah, and we cried, and I got off the phone. I was upset, but as crazy it was, I know my mother always loved me, and I was very fortunate. She didn't understand me, and that's the other thing I don't think we realize, especially as young people. Our parents didn't have a guidebook about, you hear about straight people, how do you deal with parenting? Well, parenting a gay child So as I got older, I said, why isn't she marching for gay, parents and gay friends? You know, she just didn't understand it. So I have to be a little more compassionate. At the time, though, I was the child, she was the adult. So she asked me to don't tell your father. My father was this tough truck driver. But my brothers and sisters were somewhat curious, but it was a little difficult, but they were trying to understand and they were trying to help me out. In 1978, when I worked at the Pleasure Chest, there were 50 employees. There are only 2 of us that are alive today. So 48 people had died of HIV/AIDS. So what happened was, in 1978, one of the members of the staff, and I mean it was sex, drugs, rock and roll. I mean it was a lot of, we were kind of wild and crazy in those days. But what happened was, it was called GRID, and the Centers from Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, came up and interviewed. It was the first time that they had heard about this, and New York was an area that this was happening at. And so what happened was, we ended up, doctors came in and they, took these people, and I mean the lesions and the wasting and there was a lot of difficult times. So I was very fortunate, but out of the 50 people I worked with, only 2 of us are alive, which means 48 people have died. And so my mother said at one point, my mother's 86, she goes, you've been to more funerals than I have, and I really have. But I've got a new philosophy on life. I used to cry and I used to feel so depressed, but I said, you know what? Those people were in my life for a reason. It may have been a short time, a small chapter of my life, or for a long time. And they added a little je ne sais quoi, a little fun, a little craziness, and that's what life's about. So I did want to mention, because it's an important part of our history. Over the years, I would visit my family and would discuss gay issues. We'd watch Phil Donahue, Oprah Winfrey, and 2020, and it always seemed, because I would always visit at holiday times, they would always do a discussion on their TV shows about gays and lesbians. And the good thing is, my family really got to a point where my mother, looked at me one day and she goes, these gay people are normal. They're just like straight people. And my brothers and sisters, enjoyed meeting my gay friends and wanted to know about my life. And so educating and just getting to know things were better. And almost 40 years later, my mother now tells everybody she's proud of her gay son and I'm a gift from God. So it really does change as things progress with some people. I was very fortunate. My dad died a few years ago, and we never talked about my gayness, but a week before he died, I went to visit him down in Florida, and we had a conversation, and he said, I know you're different from your other brothers and sisters, but always know that I love you. And every child needs to hear that. And that really was a very, very good thing, because I know a lot of people that don't get that. And like I said, he didn't understand it, but I was his son. Okay. Now, I grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, and there wasn't very much really role models for gay people. So, in other words, the gay person was either the villain or the nut job, or just somebody that kind of the freak in the movie. And it's a shame, but that's the way things were back then. Things have changed so much since then. In 1985, there was a movie called Making Love. It was the first movie that I saw. It had Kate Jackson in it, Harry Hamlin, and I think his name was Michael Onction. And it was the first time I saw real gay people that cared about each other, that were, in a way, normal and like me. And so it was really good to see that, because before that I really hadn't seen much. Over the years, TV shows and films have changed so much over the years. We're very fortunate that we were growing up, Will and Grace, the leads were gay, and movies just, we were talking earlier about transgenders, things like, people like that I just never really understood. And even as a gay person, I had to educate myself and say, we all have a human experience. It's just, some people are different, but acceptance is the big thing. All right, I taught kindergarten in New York City public schools for 27 years. And when I began in 1988, I was told by my principal, great resume, I'd be a great teacher, I had a lot of enthusiasm, but don't tell anybody about your lifestyle. And I remember my first year, the parents were up in arms. I mean, I didn't announce it, but I mean, obviously the hands are moving. I can't pretend I'm Italian. I mean, I'm gay, you know. So I just, did what I had to do. And the principal met with the 30 parents of my kindergarten class, and she said, give Mr. Winant a month, and then we'll review it. Well, thankfully, the children loved me. The children wanted to come to school. The children were excited about school. And I really felt I was a good teacher, and I really, really tried very hard. And the parents eventually came around that year. Now, it wasn't always easy. Now and then a child, at 5 years old, they don't really understand things, and they would come up and they'd say, oh, Mr. Winant, my dad called you a faggot. He called you a fruitcake. I said, well, a fruitcake's a dessert. It's not a dessert I like, but they usually have it around Christmas time. But I learned early on. One time, a parent, my first year, called me a faggot. And I went to the parent and I said, look, no matter what you think of me, I'm here for your child. Please don't do that. Well, the next day, the kid walked in and said, Mr. Winant, my father didn't smack me. So you knew the kid got hit. So we had to bring the father in and stuff. So I guess what I'm saying is, over the years, I've learned by, your battles and your wars. My mother used to talk about this with the kids. There are battles and there are wars. There are things that you just kind of let slide. And so I knew if I was proud of myself. I knew who I was, but I also knew that if I talked to a parent about a child, about my gayness or anything, that the the child would be the brunt of it. So I just learned to let it go. And the kids, like I say, for the most part, they accepted me. And the parents eventually did too. It got to a point where the other teachers got jealous because all the parents were requesting that their kids come to my class, because I was the one that was doing the 20 trips. We got the kids on stage. We were all over the place, out on the playground, but we also had the report card, and we worked hard at that, but it was an enjoyable time. I've spoken at, things have changed so much. I retired 2 years ago, and, what am I going to do with my life? A friend of mine teaches at a private school, and they have what are called gay-straight alliances, and they're in public schools too. And I spoke about my life, and I'm used to being with 5-year-olds, and it was very refreshing. And I've spoken to this group 3 times because they said I'm the funniest. I mean, they've had priests, lawyers, judges, all these important people, but I'm the comedian, so they come back to me. So I'm very fortunate that they do want to hear my stories, and I'm almost have 1 million stories. And the last thing I also want to say is, the younger generation needs to know about the history. There were pioneers, GAA, Dignity, Gay Synagogue. There were a lot of different religious groups, a lot of different social, political groups, and I feel sometimes it gets lost. Young people need to know that we have a history, and I've even heard that the Board of Ed has got a gay liaison who actually is going to be implementing little things, and I think it's so important we learn about everybody else's history, and it's time that we included this.
Thank you.
One bit of advice I would give young people today is to make solid friendships with your gay, lesbian, transgendered, bisexual, and straight friends. All because as I've gotten older, 63 years I've lived in this world, those friendships are the ones that really get you through the good and bad times. They lift you up and they make life worth living. Thank you.
That was really great.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.